So now we'll understand about the introduction to the fundamental rights and the features associated. We have already seen the theory of rights. You have understood about the basic thing. Now the question comes in that what about the place of right in the Constitution of India? So rights in the Constitution, and a major part of it is the fundamental rights. Before we begin understanding certain another concept and introduction, there is one thing that you need to keep in mind, which is that it's not just the fundamental rights, but there are certain other rights also which are given in the Constitution. So what are those rights? We'll talk about it. But fundamental right is just a major chunk of it. That is what you have to understand firstly. Okay, now when we see the introduction to this, the first thing that is here is where is it given in the Constitution of India, like which parts and which articles contains the topic or the issue of fundamental rights. So it is given in part 3 of the Constitution, dealing with articles 12 to 35. Now see, Constitution of India में आप देख रहे हो part 3 fundamental rights. You know that part 1 and part 2 we are already done with all of the articles, so you can like mark in your content also. Part 1 is your union and the territory. It had 1, 2, 3. 2A is anyways abolished, so 1, 2, 3 and article number 4. Then part 2 citizenship from article number 5 to article number 11. Now we have part 3 fundamental rights from article number 12 to, you will notice, this article number 35. In between certain we have already covered, so you will see till here 35. Then part 4 will be DPSP, so anyways that is going to be the content for the next topic once we finish the fundamental rights. So now that we know that this is the place in the Constitution where it talks about the fundamental rights, then the next question would be where it is borrowed from, because we have already seen different sources of different provisions of our Constitution. So it is borrowed from USA. USA में जैसे हमारा fundamental rights होता है a list of rights, so US में they have bill of rights. ठीक है, that is one thing. चलिए ये तो ठीक है, but now the question is that this part 3 in our Constitution, fundamental rights, is called as Magna Carta of India. Now what is Magna Carta? Magna Carta was basically the first written document. ठीक है, focus on each and every word very carefully. I'm going to pose a question to you and you will not directly find the answer in your book. It is indirectly given but not directly given, so many people miss out on it. So understand, Magna Carta of India, and it was the first Magna Carta in specifically first written document relating to the fundamental rights of citizens. 1215 England की ये बात है. So Magna Carta basically is relating to England, but the idea of fundamental rights we have borrowed from USA. So shouldn't there be a question that when this is called as Magna Carta of India, why do not we have the provisions of the UK Constitution? Why have we borrowed it from USA? Magna Carta word has its significance because it is denoting about that first time England में क्या हुआ कि अब जो है understood यहाँ पर हुआ that there will be the rule of law and not men. ठीक है, in the sense that law will prevail by the fundamental rights, and the first written document hold its significance. That is okay, but then why do we not have the UK provisions and why do we have the US provisions? That is the first set of questions to answer before we proceed to understand about the another thing. Let's try to understand a couple of things about UK and US Constitution which will directly indirectly help us answer this question. Now when we have done the types of constitution, तो आपको मैंने एक चीज़ बताई थी कि UK का constitution जो है वो क्या है, unwritten है, that you know, right? Now because that is an unwritten constitution, यहाँ पे क्या है ना, there is no specific code of fundamental rights जैसे हमारे पास है, यहाँ पे कोई specific code of fundamental rights नहीं है. So here basically the idea prevails that here it is kind of a नेगेटिव. सो यू विल से कि क्या उनके पास राइट्स ही नहीं है? बिल्कुल भी नहीं. हमने तो बोला ही कि हाँ ठीक है राइट्स तो हैं, बट किस तरीके से हैं? देयर इज़ एक्चुअली अ काइंड ऑफ नेगेटिव फाउंडेशन ऑफ इंडिविजुअल राइट्स इन यूके. अब ये क्या है, कैसे है? इट इज़ लाइक दिस that here they do have fundamental rights but not in a specified document. No specific code. Rights हैं but code नहीं है. That is why we call it ना कि एक जगह पर वो documented नहीं है and there was no specific body convened to make it. Therefore it is unwritten constitution. So the negative foundation lies in the sense that as much time any individual is not violating any rule of law, the person is okay to go ahead with. I mean, the person will have his or her right intact. So here judiciary plays a role. ठीक है, जुडिशियल डिसीजंस जो हैं वो क्या करते हैं, सिक्योर करते हैं किसको, इंडिविजुअल की लिबर्टी को. और लिबर्टी सिक्योर हो जाती है तो आपका राइट्स भी सिक्योर हो जाता है. ठीक है, तो इफ़ in any case, let's say the matters which are brought before the court or the cases which are brought before the court, the judiciary will decide and secure the individual liberty and the rights, and the individual is again good to go ahead. So here the judiciary will act as the guardian of rights, and the courts will have full power to protect the individual against the executive tyranny. Executive is what I have used, not legislature, because here a problem lies. Here they do have judiciary ka importance, but they cannot protect the individual against the legislative aggression. So here that is a main reason that India did not borrow this feature of rights from UK. एक तो unwritten वाला aspect है ही, we have a written constitution, they have unwritten, but here their idea of right, ठीक है, so judiciary will protect the individual against executive tyranny but not against legislative aggression. Why? Or in short, you can also say there is no power of judicial review over the legislature. Why? Because you know here they have the parliamentary sovereignty. ठीक है, and because they have parliamentary sovereignty, no fundamental rights is binding on the legislature. Parliament can choose anything to be right or not choose anything. It is all the discretion of the parliament. So parliament here is supreme. ठीक है, so therefore this is a major reason that India did not borrow the feature from UK about the fundamental rights. And we have seen that we have borrowed it from US. So US में you know there is a written constitution. उनका जो code of rights है that is called as Bill of Rights. And here the constitution makers of US were sure of the idea that they will make certain set of rights, and they were apprehensive of the tyranny from both legislature and executive. So they were very sure of the idea that our fundamental rights are going to be equally bounding on the legislature and executive. So here they have the idea of judicial supremacy. You know, US में the idea is of judicial supremacy. Here they have UK में parliamentary sovereignty, but here we have judicial supremacy. And because we have judicial supremacy, here the courts can declare any act which is in contravention of the fundamental rights as void, ठीक है, or you can say unconstitutional. And also judiciary takes the power to modify fundamental rights in case of any emergency, or let's say in case of any extraordinary situation. India maybe, although we have the legislature doing that, but here judiciary takes care of that. So in US में judicial supremacy है, UK में you have the parliamentary sovereignty या legislature की sovereignty. So and India में हमने क्या रखा हुआ है, दोनों का mix रखा हुआ है, दोनों का एक balance रखा है. ठीक है, we have tried to have the compromise between both parliamentary sovereignty, which is a feature borrowed from Britain, and judicial supremacy, which is a feature borrowed from USA. How we have the balance of both? हमने जो parliamentary system है, rather than the presidential system of US, we have borrowed the parliamentary system from UK or Britain. So in this way we have kept this. However, we have not kept the parliament to be supreme because it is restricted or limited by certain aspects, like having a written constitution, like having a federal government, like having the fundamental rights, etc. ठीक है, एंड यूएस का में भी वी हैव जुडिशियल सुप्रीमेसी, बट हियर जो पार्लियामेंट के लिमिटेशंस हैं ठीक है, वी स्टिल हैव दैट. एंड जुडिशरी में भी लिमिटेशंस हैं, दैट पार्लियामेंट कैन ऑल्सो कम अप विद एक्ट्स इफ दे आर नॉट सेटिस्फाइड विद जुडिशियल एक्शंस. हाउएवर डेफिनेटली जुडिशरी कैन डिक्लेयर देम अनकॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल एंड वाइड बेस्ड ऑन इफ दे आर वायलेटिंग एनी प्रोविजंस ऑफ द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन और नॉट. ठीक है, तो ये दोनों हमने बैलेंस करके रखा हुआ है. So I hope these things are now clear to you. Next we will move about certain other introductory aspects of the fundamental rights. The first is that they are justiciable. So this is one of the features also. So we'll have the list of the features of the fundamental rights, and in that you will see that we have all these pointers. उसमें भी justiciable वाला एक point है. ठीक है, सो जस्टिसेबल का क्या मतलब बनता है, दैट द पर्सन्स कैन मूव मीन्स यू कैन गो टू द कोर्ट, यू कैन अपील इन द कोर्ट फॉर इन्फोर्समेंट ऑफ राइट्स इफ वायलेटेड. एंड हियर फंडामेंटल राइट्स के केस में यू कैन डायरेक्टली गो टू द सुप्रीम कोर्ट. सो दिस इज़ अ वेरी मेजर फीचर हियर, that it's not just about that you will have to go to the high court and via the means of high court you might need to go to the supreme court. No, if your fundamental rights are violated you can directly go to the supreme court. So that is the idea of justiciable rights. Then another is that we have more elaborate provisions of fundamental rights than any other constitution. So even if it's US, उनसे भी ज़्यादा इलेबोरेटिव प्रोविजंस हमारे फंडामेंटल राइट्स का है इंडिया में. Then the fundamental rights are guaranteed by the constitution to all the persons without any discrimination. You have to notice that these rights are given to everybody. It is not about that we discriminate on the basis of any matter, race, religion, etc., etc. Now there are certain exceptions to it that we'll deal when we come to those rights. Secondly, when we say all persons, it doesn't mean that all the fundamental rights are given to all persons. ठीक है, there are certain fundamental rights which are given to citizens also and some to persons also. So what are those categorizations, that we'll do in the next video. So I have done a separate video on the same and we'll do it in the next one. So uphold these fundamental rights, uphold the equality, because we are telling that we are not discriminating. So it is upholding the equality of the individuals. It is also giving them the dignity or upholding their dignity. The public interest is taken care of and the unity of the nation is also taken care of. Again, as I said, this is having certain exceptions which are to be seen in the coming videos when we do the rights separately. Then they promote the ideal of political democracy. Now understand, because it is giving you a clear-cut mechanism of going to the courts and getting that political remedy. ठीक है, and the fundamental rights, when we'll do the criticisms of the right, you will see that there is one point that ये ना इकोनॉमिक एंड सोशियो डेमोक्रेसी पे ज़्यादा फोकस नहीं करती है, ये सिर्फ पॉलिटिकल एस्पेक्ट्स पे ज़्यादा फोकस करती है. एंड इकोनॉमिक एंड सोशियो एस्पेक्ट्स आर टेकन केयर ऑफ इन DPSP, डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल्स. इकोनॉमिक सोशियो मीन्स इन सम मैनर यू कैन से, फॉर एग्जांपल जहाँ पर हम बात कर सकते हैं सोशल जस्टिस की, जहाँ हम बात कर सकते हैं इकोनॉमिक जस्टिस की, इक्वल पे फॉर इक्वल वर्क एट्सेट्रा. ठीक है, ऑल ऑफ दैट्स गुड कंडीशंस ऑफ वर्क एट्सेट्रा. तो यहाँ पे द फंडामेंटल राइट्स, व्हेन यू विल डू द राइट्स इंडिविजुअली, देन यू विल अंडरस्टैंड कि यहाँ पे द काइंड ऑफ नेचर दे हैव इज़ बेसिकली डीलिंग मोर विद द आइडियल ऑफ पॉलिटिकल डेमोक्रेसी. इट ऑल्सो प्रिवेंट्स द डिस्पोटिक रूल. डिस्पोटिक रूल क्योंकि हम डेमोक्रेसी को प्रिवेंट कराते हैं यहाँ पे, आई मीन डेमोक्रेसी को हार्म होने से प्रिवेंट कराते हैं. एंड वी प्रमोट the democratic principles here, and therefore it prevents the despotic rule. And it also put limitations on the tyranny of both executive and arbitrary laws of the legislature. This is why we have seen कि हमने US में देखा कि ये legislature और executive दोनों को जो है tackle करते हैं, and we are prevented from the आर्बिट्ररी और द टिरेनिकल एक्शंस ऑफ बोथ. जबकि यूके के केस में क्या हो रहा था, ओनली एग्जीक्यूटिव से प्रिवेंशन वाज गिवन, नॉट फ्रॉम द लेजिस्लेचर, एंड देयरफॉर वी बोरोड इट फ्रॉम US. सो हियर इन इंडिया के केस में भी एग्जीक्यूटिव एंड लेजिस्लेचर दोनों से हमको बचाव दोनों के मतलब गलत एक्शन से हमको अगर कभी वह करें तो बचाव मिलता है. द फंडामेंटल राइट्स ऑल्सो एम टू एस्टैब्लिश अ गवर्नमेंट ऑफ लॉज एंड नॉट ऑफ men. Because if the executive and legislature would have been dominant, then we would have had the government of men. But because we are focusing on the limitations, and we have the prevalence of law here. Therefore it tends to create or aims to establish a government of laws, and also it protects the liberties and freedom of people against invasion by the state. So these are the rights we have seen earlier also. These are the rights and the claims that the citizens have against the state. So invasion, state invade ना कर ले आपके लाइफ में, ठीक है. सो आपकी लिबर्टी फ्रीडम जो है, एंड विल डू अ चैप्टर सेपरेट कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ इक्वालिटी एंड फ्रीडम एज आई हैव प्रॉमिस्ड वंस वी मूव टू दैट पार्ट, एंड यू विल अंडरस्टैंड द बेसिक मीनिंग ऑफ फ्रीडम थियोरेटिकली विच हैज़ बीन आस्क्ड इन द पेपर ट्वाइस. सो स्टेट का इन्वेजन आपकी लिबर्टी फ्रीडम को बचाए, ठीक है, स्टेट के फ्रीडम से आपके लिबर्टी फ्रीडम को बचाए, इस चीज़ का भी ध्यान रखा जाता है in this particular matter. Another thing is that why are they called as fundamental? Why do we call these rights as fundamental? Now see, first basic idea is that this is guaranteed to us and protected by the constitution, which is the fundamental law of the land. ठीक है, this is a very basic thing. Constitution is the fundamental law of the land and guarantee and protects the fundamental rights. तो इसलिए भी एक fundamental है. Second reason, the key word fundamental itself says that something which is very basic and something which has its need. So it is the most essential for all round development of individuals. ठीक है, फंडामेंटल इसलिए भी बोलते हैं बिकॉज दीज राइट्स आर मोस्ट एसेंशियल, दे आर द बेसिक, दे आर द इम्पॉर्टेंट कॉम्पोनेंट्स, मोस्ट एसेंशियल फॉर ऑल राउंड डेवलपमेंट ऑफ द इंडिविजुअल्स. Now how many rights we have, like how many fundamental rights we have. So we know, because we have already done about the right to property earlier. I hope you have done. In case you have not, please check the earlier videos when we were doing the basic structure and Keshwan and the Bharati case, all of that. So in that, amendment of the constitution, in that series only I have talked about certain articles of the fundamental rights, in which right to property, which was earlier a fundamental right, was also discussed. The whole story is what we have covered, so you will have to do it from there. Originally there were 7 fundamental rights in the constitution, but right to property, which was earlier a fundamental right, was deleted from this list by the 44th Amendment Act 1978, and now it is just made a legal right under Article 300A Part 12 of the Constitution. So presently, if somebody asks you, we have 6 fundamental rights, and the rights are covered in Article 14 to 32. Now see, अभी आपको बताया एक चीज़, that फंडामेंटल राइट्स का जो पूरा पार्ट 3 है, ठीक है, पार्ट 3 is covering the articles from 12 to 35. As you must have seen here, it starts from 12 and ends till 35. But the first 2 articles, 12 and 13, are not the fundamental rights, but they are about or the things related to fundamental rights. Exactly जो rights शुरू होते हैं ना, वो 14 से शुरू होते हैं, ठीक है. So this is one thing you will remember. And similarly, rights जो हैं आपके 32 पे जाके ख़त्म हो जाते हैं. The rights end at 32 if you are seeing here, ठीक है, ये ख़त्म हो जा रहे हैं यहाँ पर. तो after that 33, 34, 35 are again the things related to rights, which we'll do. In fact, we'll do it before only. Earlier ही हम पहले ये सब ख़त्म कर लेंगे, then we'll move to fundamental rights. So therefore you do not have to get confused. Part 3 is consisting of the articles from 12 to 35, but amongst them only the fundamental rights are dealing 14 to 32. The remaining 12, 13, 33, 34, 35 are dealing with the other matters related to fundamental rights, and not they are exactly the fundamental rights, ठीक है. So this also will cover in the coming videos. Now let's move on. Once we are done with the introduction, let's move on to see certain features of the fundamental rights. First, as I have told you, that some of them are available only to the citizens and others are to all the persons. Now you do not have to worry. In the next video, as I have said, I have given a categorization section there, and there we'll see the numbers also, like examples also, that which are articles are under this, which are articles under this. Right now just understand them as a feature, ठीक है, that some of the fundamental rights are given only to the citizens, some are given to all the persons. All the persons means citizens also, foreigners also, legal persons also, like corporations, companies, etc. ठीक है, this is one. Secondly, fundamental rights are not absolute, but they are qualified. So they are not as such absolute right. Absolute मतलब something which cannot be taken away or something which cannot have restrictions imposed. कि एब्सोल्यूट बस कर दिया तो कर दिया. नो, they are qualified in the sense that states can impose reasonable restrictions on them. ठीक है, this is what you have to remember. states अगर चाहें तो reasonable restrictions लगा सकती हैं. ये क्या होते हैं ये हम देखेंगे जैसे हम rights पे पहुँचेंगे. Now, what does this term reasonable signify, or it is reasonable or not, will be decided by the courts, and therefore here they try to strike a balance between the individual liberty and the social control, so that your liberty shouldn't harm somebody else's liberty, and therefore the social control is very important. ठीक है. Third is that fundamental rights की हम बात करते हैं. So all are available against the arbitrary action of the state. This you have to remember, that all the fundamental rights are available against the arbitrary action of the state. So whatever right we talk about, उसमें state का अपना role होगा ही, that the state cannot do something. Now what does the term state mean here? Is the content for the coming articles, as I have said. उस पर हम आराम से बात करेंगे. अभी के लिए just understand this much, okay? So we will see the description of this word state. So all the rights are available against the arbitrary action of the state, but some of the rights are also against the arbitrary action of the private individual. So again, in the next video, I'll give you the examples. Next is, some are negative. Some fundamental rights are negative in character. What does negative mean? Negative doesn't mean wrong. It means a kind of negative connotation. Negative connotation means placing the limitations on the authority. So some are negative in character because they place limitations. They prohibit the state from doing so. These features are to be remembered because when you will do, and we will do it directly from the constitution, as you can see. ठीक है, डायरेक्टली मैं आपको यहाँ से आर्टिकल्स दिखाऊंगी. तो व्हेन यू विल सी, लेट्स से यू नो द वर्डिंग्स ऑफ द आर्टिकल्स वर्बैटिम, तो आपको ये सब समझ आएगा. Therefore, you have to read these features, remember them very, very carefully. So they place limitations on the authority of the state. However, some fundamental rights are positive because they confer the privileges on the persons. So let's say you are giving certain privilege to any person, वो एक positive connotation देता है, and if you are putting certain limitation on something, वो थोड़ा negative connotation देता है. That is the idea. Justiciable we have already done. Then they are defended and guaranteed by the Supreme Court, and a aggrieved person can directly go to the Supreme Court. We have done. They are not sacrosanct or permanent. मतलब समथिंग नॉट, इसको आप सेक्रेड या रिलीजियस या समथिंग ऐसा कुछ नहीं मान के रखोगे, या दे आर नॉट परमानेंट. दे कैन बी रिपील्ड बाय द पार्लियामेंट. ठीक है. एंड ऑल्सो पार्लियामेंट विल बी एबल टू रिपील फंडामेंटल राइट्स ओनली बाय कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल अमेंडमेंट एक्ट बिकॉज दे आर वेरी सिग्निफिकेंट राइट्स. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि ऑर्डिनरी लॉस है वो इसको रिपील कर लेंगे. दे विल नीड कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल अमेंडमेंट एक्ट. एंड नाउ आफ्टर केशवानंद भारती केस इट वॉज ऑल्सो क्लियर दैट it should be done without affecting the basic structure of the constitution. They can be suspended during the operation of a national emergency. In case there is we have not yet done the topic of emergency, we'll do it in coming classes. But if certain situation happen, they can be suspended also, but there are certain exceptions. सो आर्टिकल 2021 इनके जो राइट्स होते हैं उसको नहीं सस्पेंड होते हैं. दे आर एक्सेप्शंस. अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट आर्टिकल 19 के अंदर 6 राइट्स होते हैं फ्रीडम वाले. सो दे कैन बी सस्पेंडेड ओनली व्हेन इमरजेंसी इज़ डिक्लेयर्ड ऑन द ग्राउंड्स ऑफ वॉर, यानी इसको एक्सटर्नल बोलते हैं. एक होता है इंटरनल एग्रेशन भी, पर वो क्या होता है वो हम इमरजेंसी के चैप्टर में देखेंगे. ठीक है. देन द स्कोप ऑफ द ऑपरेशन ऑफ द फंडामेंटल राइट्स इज़ लिमिटेड बाय 3 आर्टिकल्स. मतलब these 3 are exceptions to fundamental right. 31A, B and C. Again, I hope you remember, we have done, those who have done the previous videos, they know this. I have given you elaborated and therefore it is marked here also that we have done 31A. Then 31B जो कि 9 शेड्यूल के साथ देखा जाता है, and 31C. ठीक है. So these are exceptions. So that is also one feature of fundamental rights. Then the application of the fundamental rights to members of the armed force, paramilitary, police force, intelligence agency and analogous service etc. they can be restricted or abrogated by parliament. Now see, you do not have to worry about the wordings of all of these. Every feature that we are discussing just now only as a list is going to be done in detail in separate in fundamental rights. For example, these 3 are about article 33, 34 and 35. यहाँ लिखा हुआ नहीं है, but this is article 35. So the idea is that we are going to see all of these articles separately. ठीक है, जैसे यहाँ पे ये सारे दिए हुए हैं ना, तो we'll see all of that also anyways. And this in fact, as I told, we'll do it before doing the real fundamental rights. So you just have to know the headings of these. कि आर्टिकल 33 बताता है that fundamental rights का जो application होगा to certain classes of members, because these are all exceptional categories, because in the beginning we have said that they are non-discriminatory, they are given to every person, etc, etc. But as I also told you, but there will be certain exceptions. So these are the exceptions, and therefore separate articles are dealing with that. So article 33 talks about how the fundamental rights will apply to the members of, you know, these people who are indulged in the security services. So you cannot give them as equal rights as any other ordinary citizen, नहीं तो प्रॉब्लम हो जाएगी सिक्योरिटी को. सो आर्म्ड फोर्स, पैरामिलिट्री, पुलिस, इंटेलिजेंस, एट्सेट्रा एट्सेट्रा, इनके लोगों के लिए थोड़ा किस तरीके से रेस्ट्रिक्शन या एब्रोगेशन होगा वो पार्लियामेंट डिसाइड करती है. ठीक है. देन आर्टिकल 34 बोलता है कि द एप्लीकेशन ऑफ फंडामेंटल राइट्स कैन ऑल्सो बी रेस्ट्रिक्टेड वाइल मार्शल लॉ इज इन फोर्स इन एरिया. मार्शल लॉ क्या है? मिलिट्री रूल. सो व्हेन मिलिट्री रूल इज इम्पोज्ड अंडर अबनॉर्मल सर्कमस्टांसेस टू रिस्टोर द ऑर्डर, तो उस केस में भी हम रेस्ट्रिक्ट कर सकते हैं. एंड मोस्ट ऑफ फंडामेंटल राइट्स आर डायरेक्टली इन्फोर्सिएबल. तो ये क्या होता है? सेल्फ इन्फोर्सिएबल होता है. मतलब कि फंडामेंटल राइट्स हैं तो इनको बस अपने आप मान लिया जाएगा कि हाँ, these are enforced, while a few of them can be enforced only on the basis of a law made. ठीक है. तो they need a law to be made for the enforcement of the fundamental rights. And these laws, I'll show you again, I'll give you those examples. So these laws can be made only by the parliament and not state legislature. These are the pointers that can directly come in your prelims, and therefore, as I said, each feature can become a pointer for your prelims examination. So this was the content for this particular video. In the next, as you can see, we'll discuss certain articles, and maybe in between, actually not next, this is next to next. In between, I'll discuss one article on the categorization, etc. One video on the categorization, etc. Therein you will understand it in detail, and then we'll move to this particular video. So see you guys. See you in the next one. Take care till then. Bye bye.